with an idea, because when I prepare well, it actually comes out better. Good morning, everyone. We will be starting this morning the second talk of the Rebbe and Matos in the book of selections from Likutei Sichos for the book of Numbers. This week we study a combined portion, Matot and Masei, the last two of the book of Numbers. Next week we're starting the book of Dvarim, Deuteronomy. I would like to give a short introduction. Towards the end of the portion of Matot, we read about 2.5 tribes. Bnei, the sons of Gad, Bnei Reuven, and half of Menashe. Those 2.5 tribes, we are talking about the 40th year, just before they enter the Holy Land. They turn to Moshe and request not to cross the Jordan, meaning not to enter the Holy Land, but remain on the east side of the Jordan, meaning across the Jordan, outside of Israel. What was the reasoning? Because they are shepherds, they have lots of cattle, and there is not enough space for grazing for their sheep and herds, and therefore they want to remain outside. What does Moshe do? He's extremely furious. Is extremely furious, and he rebukes them that they are following in the footsteps of their forefathers. The first generation of people who left Egypt, the spies, refused to enter the Holy Land, and they are punished to live in the desert for 40 years and not see the Holy Land. And now you children, 2 generations later, 40 years later, are coming up with the same lame excuses and same reasons, and you did not learn from the past. They turn to Moshe and they say, we are willing to fight on behalf of the rest of the Jewish people, be in the front of the war. We will volunteer to be at the front of the war, and only then go back and live across the Jordan outside of Israel. And Moshe Rabbeinu accepts it immediately, and he summons the leaders of the rest of the tribes, and he makes sure that everybody is aware of what the 2.5 tribes accepted or were willing to do. And actually they did exactly that. So they actually accepted the condition, and they fulfilled the condition. Not only they fought for 7 years on behalf of Jewish people, but they also were there while they were dividing the land for 7 years.
What happened to the land?
After that, they went back. What happened to the land across the Jordan?
No, the land in Israel that they were supposed to get, because it
was divided among other tribes.
Just got divvied up.
God decided to split it among 9.5 tribes.
So which half tribe stayed, which half not explained, just the half.
Whichever wanted to stay, stayed. Whatever didn't want to stay.
You just pick a number of their half?
Yeah. But just incidentally, the tribe of Menashe are the ones who loved the Holy Land more than most of the other tribes, because the daughters of Tzlofchad from last week that they were fighting for a share in the Holy Land, Lemishpechot Menashe ben Yosef, they were the descendants of Menashe. Ephraim, his brother, were the ones that left early before Moshe came. They tried and they got killed. So this, some say, and commentary explain that,
Before Moshe came?
Before Moshe came to Egypt, they decided to escape. And they escaped, and Amalekite, another nation, yeah. The commentators explain that the half tribe who did not do it on their own volition. They didn't want to. But Moshe wanted them to be there among the other 2 tribes to inspire them to follow the right way. But because you don't see that the half tribe is appearing before Moshe, asking to stay in across the outside of Israel. Only later, when Moshe summons the leaders and he's letting them know that the two tribes, he's already saying the half tribe of Manasseh also. He interjected the half tribe.
They gave up 14 years.
They gave up 14 years. Right. They were asked to offer 7 years, and they gave 14.
How long was it about?
7 years. They did it very slow because they did not want to conquer in one shot. And then if the land would stay desolate, there will be lots of dangerous animals overgrowing.
7 years or 14?
So as they conquered, they settled and slowly.
So 7 or 14?
7 years of war to completely eradicate all the nations, and 7 years of dividing. Even after that, there were some sections that were not divided, that were not taken away. Primarily the Holy Temple, the Temple Mount was owned by a Jebusite, one of the 7 nations, Aravna. He was a Jebusite. They did not want to kill him because in that land they didn't want any bloodshed, so they purchased that land. Okay, now we're ready to start. This week's Torah reading relates that the tribe of Reuben and Gad had many herds. After surveying the land of Sichon and Og that the Jews had conquered, they approached Moshe saying, "The land that God has struck down before the congregation of Israel is a land fit for herds, and your servants possesses herds. Therefore they asked, let this land be given to you servants as an inheritance. Do not have us cross the Jordan." Right? That's what they asked. Moshe answered them, "Will you brothers go out to war while you dwell here? Why discourage the hearts of the children of Israel from crossing into the land? Moreover, he castigated them severely, saying, 'This is what your ancestors did,' as will be explained below." Not only he says, "How dare you think that the rest of the people are going to fight and you're going to sit here and enjoy life on the beach?" And the second one is castigating them about them following the footsteps of the forefathers. The question arises, how could these tribes, Gad and Reuben, even consider the possibility that Transjordan, a land for which the entire Jewish people fought, be given to them alone as an inheritance? Why should they, the tribes of Gad and Reuben, settle on that land while the remainder of the Jewish people go out and wage war in the Eretz Israel? That land, we call it this land of Sichon and Og. Sichon and Og were two giants, and they protected Ammon and Moab. But Ammon and Moab, you're not allowed to fight. The Jewish people are forbidden from fighting, so they had to be conquered by Midianites. And then the Jewish people came and conquered them. They are the land that the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, the family of Gad and Reuven, the tribes wanted to take. So they're going to get it for free, without fight, without war, without bloodshed, while the other tribes will have to fight for the land. How is it possible that they thought that they deserved that? The Or Chaim resolves this difficulty, explaining that the tribes of Gad and Reuben clarified the issue by the way they describe the land. The land that God has struck down before the congregation of Israel. Since God would wage war on behalf of the Jewish people, the participation of these tribes would thus not be so significant in conquering the lands on the other side of the Jordan. The Or Chaim said, when they approach Moshe, they talk about the land that God has conquered and presented to the congregation of Israel. What they meant to say is, just like here, God is the one who provided us and made a miracle, so we were able to conquer. As we know, those giants died miraculously, and the people also, there is a whole story you read about 3 weeks ago in the Torah. The same is the Holy Land. It's going to be conquered by the Holy Land. So you don't need training, and you don't need weapons, and you don't need numbers of soldiers. the other 9 tribes, the other 10 tribes will enter the Holy Land, and God will make sure all their enemies run away. In this light, Moshe's answers to them, will your brother go out to war while you dwell here, can be interpreted to mean, true, it is God who will wage the war, but the people must at least make the effort of going out to do battle. Therefore, it is inappropriate for you to settle here while your brothers go out to war. And that's what Moshe says. Of course, God will do it. It's a miracle. But God will not perform a miracle unless we put our efforts. And you brothers will fight and put an effort while you're doing nothing. You're just sitting, living in your own communities, enjoying life. Moshe added another point. Why discourage the hearts of the children of Israel from crossing into the land? By staying in Transjordan, the tribes of Gad and Reuben would demoralize the Jewish people and discourage them from entering Eretz Israel. The other tribes would interpret the decision of Gad and Reuben to remain on the eastern side of the Jordan as stemming from their fear of war, and the statement, the land that God has struck down before the congregation of Israel, as merely a facade to camouflage these feelings. Therefore, Moshe was concerned that allowing these 2 tribes to stay in Transjordan would weaken the resolve of the people as a whole. Later, Moshe, after he said to them, you have to put some effort into war in order for God to help, and it's impossible for you not to put any effort while the other people are doing it. In addition, he's rebuking them, comparing them to the spies, that they will weaken the heart of the rest of the tribes from entering the Holy Land, saying that they will think in their hearts that these 2 tribes don't want to enter the Holy Land, not because they have cattle, because they need a grazing place. It's because they're afraid they don't like the Holy Land, just like the spies originally. And therefore, Moshe rebukes them that with their action, they intend to weaken the hearts of the other tribes from entering the Holy Land.
So which comes first? They realize that there's something to justify their staying on the east side. They would have gone to Moshe and said, we'll battle for you and so on. But we're hearing now Moshe first rebuked them, and then they said, we'll go with you.
Of course.
I thought it would have been the other way around. He said, we want to stay here, but we're glad to help you.
No. They came and says, we have lots of cattle, and therefore we would like to stay here. Moshe rebukes them, 2. One, as we understand it with the Or HaChaim explanation. One, he says, of course, God will perform a miracle, but we need to do our part, and you are not going to do the part. You're allowing others to fight in a war while you're staying home. It's not right. In addition, he says, you will discourage others from entering the Holy Land, saying that you're not entering because you don't want to live in Israel, not for the reason you gave. And therefore, they will also refuse to enter the Holy Land. And by doing so, you're following your forefathers' footsteps. Now, later on, so then they come back and they said, we will go and be in the front of the war, meaning we will do our share, and therefore you have nothing to fear. And Moshe accepted it. Moshe then continued, rebuking them. This is what your ancestors did, referring to the spies who also had discouraged the Jewish people from entering Eretz Israel. And he concluded, behold, you have arisen in the place of your ancestors. This interpretation raises several questions. Among them, the Rebbe is asking three questions the Rebbe is going to ask on this. Number 1, by saying that God has struck down before the congregation of Israel, the tribes of Gad and Reuben desire to clarify not only that the Jewish people could conquer Eretz Israel, but they would do so without any difficulty. Seemingly, this is the direct opposite of the argument of the spies, who stated we cannot ascend, that it would be impossible to achieve this goal. How then could Moshe compare them to the spies, saying, behold, you have arisen in the place of your ancestors? The disciples of sinful people. Because of the mere possibility that their decision to remain in the eastern side of the Jordan could be interpreted as resulting from fear. Says the Rabbi, I don't understand. The children, how can Moshe rebuke them by comparing them to the spies? They are quite the opposite. When the spies came back to give a report, they say, we will not be able to conquer, and they refer to God. God cannot perform this type of activity because they are so fortified and they are such strong people. Yet the two tribes, quite the opposite. It says God has performed a miracle now for this land. He will perform the miracle over there, and there is no need for fights and training and weapons. And therefore, we don't need to. It's unnecessary for us to be part of the community. So, in other words, what they say is the opposite of the spies. Number two, the tribes of Gad and Reuben approach Moshe with a request. If we have found favor in your eyes, do not have us cross the Jordan. It is obvious that if Moshe would have denied the request, they would have been ready to enter Eretz Israel, and thus they would not discourage the hearts of the children of Israel. When Moshe did not accede to their request, why did he have to rebuke them, and especially in such a lengthy and detailed manner, even saying, this is what your ancestor did? Why such a severe response? The Rebbe is asking us another question. When they approach Moshe, they ask if your servants find favors in your eyes. In other words, they are not demanding and they are not stating facts, they are asking. Asking means that if their request is refused, they will accept it and do what is asked of them. So they come to Moshe and they're asking. They're entitled to ask, yet more, because they are not demanding and they are not stating facts, and yet Moshe rebukes them as if they already decided they are not entering the land, comparing them to the spies. This is a very harsh response. How is it possible that Moshe gives such a harsh response? Yes.
If you just said no, you've gone with it.
Right.
That's all you have to say.
Right.
So the Rabbi is saying is, why did he go to
Why? Right. And it goes over and continues with the, so to say, rebuke. See, after the tribes of Gad and Reuben volunteered to proceed as vanguard, Moshe immediately accepted the request without any further rebuke. This implies that their settling on the eastern bank of Jordan was in accordance with the divine intent. However, we find that our sages describe their decision to settle there with the verse, an inheritance seized hastily at the outset, whose end was not blessed. And they explain that the tribes of Gad and Reuben were exiled before the other Jewish people because they seized their inheritance hastily and remained in Transjordan since Moshe agreed to their request. Why were they accused of seizing their inheritance hastily? The third question the Rebbe is asking is, why is it after they explain their intent that they're willing to fight, Moshe immediately accepts that without any doubt. He's not asking them again. He's not meaning Moshe, if he accepted it, I mean God agrees to it. Moshe wouldn't do anything without God's approval. Yet the sages in the Talmud tells us that because they accepted or they took their share hastily right away without thinking properly, they were punished later on, 1,000 years later, when an Assyrian king conquered the whole part of the universe, the first tribes to be exiled from their homeland was those two tribes, Gad and Reuben. And the other tribes enjoyed freedom for another hundreds of years, 100 or 200 years. Only later they were exiled. And the reason is simply because they took an inheritance a little too quick without thinking properly. So we see that there is something negative, something wrong with their request, even though Moshe agrees immediately.
really odd, that, Rabbi. I mean, basically, they didn't take it hastily. They wanted it. Rebuked, and he said, "You know what? We'll go with you and fight until the Romans come and we'll come back." Where's the hastiness? With what?
The hastiness is not willing to live in the land of Israel for a little bit and see which one. The decision that the Holy Land does not have enough grazing space was too quick. They should have not made that decision before weighing all the options. They pretty much made that decision before they had all the facts, because they weren't in the Holy Land.
I have a question. We're discussing the land that's promised to them, and the land that they were dividing is mostly between Jordan and the sea.
Right.
But when we're reading Abraham's promise, it was from the Euphrates, the river of Euphrates, all the way to the Nile, which is much greater territory than from Jordan to the sea.
Okay, I am thinking actually, I am not thinking, I'm certain that this is incorrect. God told Abraham to go to the land that I will show you, which I will give you. When he landed in the Holy Land, in Shechem, in Nablus, God says to him, go to the length and the breadth and the width, because I will give it to you. From the large, from one land to the other, and it refers to the Jordan and the sea. So it's not the Euphrates in Iraq. The next section, the rabbi is saying there is a way to try and explain it, and it will accommodate some questions, but not all of them. I want to go to the Kabbalah explanation to the whole story. It's underneath, beneath the outer shell, the internal aspect, that the story suddenly is a story that affects each one of us. It's not a story in the past history. So we continue on page 525.
525.
Yes. The above difficulty can be resolved on the basis of the explanations of Hasidut gives why the tribes of Reuben and Gad desired to remain in Transjordan and occupy themselves with pasture herds. While walking as shepherds, one does not encounter many distractions, nor become intensely involved with worldly matters. Even while pursuing that occupation, one can still remain continuously connected to God. For this reason, the patriarchs and Yaakov's sons, with the exception of Joseph, chose to walk as shepherds, so they would not be distracted by worldly matters and would constantly remain in a chariot, that is, a conduit for expression of godliness. Did you understand what we just read? Says the Rebbe, Hasidut, the Kabbalah and Hasidut explain the following. Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, those two tribes, they were shepherds, and that's why they want to stay in the Transjordan. That's how they start the request, because we are shepherds, which means being a shepherd means that you, so to say, separate yourself from the world. You are closed off from the old challenges. When you live in the town and you're a jeweler, or you are a grocer, or you are a tailor, you deal with men and women, you deal with challenges. You also deal with competition. And when it comes to competition, it's very hard to remain steadfast, honest, and kind to others. In other words, the challenge of the universe, that the universe presents itself in day-to-day life, are totally gone when you are a shepherd. Because a shepherd, what do? Just like a farmer. What does a shepherd do? He's grazing his sheep by himself, with his family, with his servants, but there is no challenges, there is no competition, because if someone is grazing here, I'm going to go somewhere else. That's it. And what do I do all day? The sheep, the cows, the bulls, the horses, they know how to eat. What do? You take out your flute, you enjoy nature, and you thank God for all that He has given you. Being a shepherd is, we call it separating yourself from the universe. That's why Abraham was a shepherd. That's why Yitzchak was a shepherd. That's why Yaakov was a shepherd. That's why his children were shepherds, with the exception of Yosef. Why? Because they wanted to stay connected to God. And if they are in town, there is a disco, and there is a rock star who is coming to town, and there is Instagram, and there is Facebook, and there is all kinds of activities that continuously detract you from serving God, from doing what's right. A shepherd is able to do just what God was demanding. No challenges. And that's why they start by asking Moshe that they have herds, that they want to be shepherds, and to be, therefore, they want to be outside of the Holy Land. On this basis, we can appreciate how the comparison between the tribes of Gad and Reuben and the spies reflects also the inner dimensions of their conduct. The spies desired to remain in the desert for spiritual reasons. They knew that when they entered the Holy Land, Eretz Israel, the manna would cease and descend to the manna would cease to descend, and they would have to survive on ordinary bread. This would require engaging in many different types of demanding work, plowing, growing, and the like. Therefore, the spies the desires to remain in the desert, sequestered from the world, where even the actual food they ate and the water they drank consisted of bread from heaven and water from Miriam's well. Now we understand why Moshe is comparing them to spies. What did the spies wanted? According to Kabbalah, they refuse to enter the Holy Land when they'll have to plow and plant and sow and grind and fight about the cost of bread. Now in the desert, everything is provided for them. All they do is study Torah. The Gad and Reuben wanted in a similar way the same thing. And that's why Moshe tells them, you are like your forefathers. What?
There's been many arguments that the spies were correct in what they did, even though they were punished because they denigrated the lands and became conquered. But still, their motives were pure and reasonable. And they did back. They did say, yes, it's got all this stuff, but it's going to be difficult.
I have not heard of such a thing. This is the first I hear. That
I'm sure there's some, but
the spies' motives, the punishment was so severe that I don't see any positive motive. There are many, many ways to explain their sin. The one we explain now is simple. They refused to enter the Holy Land simply because they knew that when they enter the Holy Land, they won't be able to be connected to God in the way they are now. And for God punished them because God says to them, this is the reason you're created. You're created to face challenges and overcome them. We just had in Tanya this week that the word milchama, war, is from the root word of lechem, bread. It's part and parcel of life. They refuse to get out of the womb. The womb is where the baby is provided all his nutrition, don't even have to chew, don't have to go to the bathroom. Everything is taken care of. Is very warm. It does not have to be dressed. It doesn't have to sleep. It doesn't have to wake up. It doesn't have to eat. God allowed for the Jewish people to live in the womb for a period of time and then get out. The baby refused to get out. They wanted to stay in the womb. They wanted to be provided the manna, just like the umbilical cord is providing the fetus all the food from the mother. And that's the punishment. The baby refused to be born. So I don't know about positive motives.
I have to confess, I think I would probably want to do that too.
Everybody wants to do that. Now, the tribes of Gad and Reuben, what do they want? They want to be shepherds. They want to be outside of Israel by themselves. So they have to plow, they have to plant, they have to protect their fields, they have to harvest and go sell it and shear the sheep and sell the wool and pay for the health insurance and pay for the lawyers and all the doctors. But it's totally different and far removed from the universe and the challenges that the rest of the tribes will be facing inside the Holy Land. True, the patriarchs and Yaakov's son lived as shepherds, as was the desire of the spies. They withdrew from the pressures of day-to-day experience. However, such conduct was acceptable only before the giving of the Torah. For the spies, this was considered sinful. God gave the Torah to make the physical world a conduit for godliness. By doing so, it changed the spiritual dynamic of acts of existence. From that time onward, it became necessary for our divine service to involve working with material entities to transform them into dwelling place for God. So the forefathers, what they did was proper, because that's how you connect to God, by removing yourself from the universe, by staying far away from other humanity. But once God gave it the Torah, he came down on Mount Sinai, which means he infused materialistic objects and the physical world with holiness. So how do you connect to God? Through this physical universe. Remaining a shepherd, refusing to enter the Holy Land, is a big no-no. It's staying away from God. The above, however, reinforces the question asked previously at the conclusion of section 2. Why did Moshe agree to allow the tribes of Gad and Reuben to remain in Transjordan and not enter the Holy Land? Now we can ask the second question. Okay, now we understand why they wanted to remain in the Transjordan. They wanted to remain aloof, removed from mundane and day-to-day life. But Moshe accepted it. Even after he rebukes them that they are following the spies' behavior, how is it possible Moshe accepted it? Number 4, these questions can be answered by offering the following preface. Even after the giving of the Torah, the Jewish people are divided into two groups, Torah scholars and working people, Issachar and Zevulun, masters of Torah and masters of good deeds. Says the Rebbe, when God gave us the Torah, the Jewish people are divided into two categories. Masters of Torah, those who dwell and study Torah and teach Torah all day, and those who go to work and earn a living and pay bills and assist those who study Torah. On the surface, since, as explained above, the intent of the giving of the Torah involves making the world a conduit for godliness, seemingly the entire Jewish people should work to earn their livelihoods, and in this way make all levels of material existence conduits for godliness. However, the resolution of the matter depends on the concept that man's effort intended to transform the world into a dwelling place for God in the lower realms. The meaning of making the world a dwelling place for God is not only enabling his essence to dwell within this world, but also that his essence be revealed here. Therefore, for this intent to be consummated, two types of divine services are necessary. A, the fulfillment of the mitzvot with material entities, which draws down God's essence, and B, the study of Torah, which enables the essence of God that is drawn down through the observance of mitzvot to be manifest in the revealed matter. What the rabbi is saying, even though God has put in godliness in material, physical objects, there are still two ways to serve God, and both are necessary. One is the study of Torah, to reveal what God's will is. And the second is the actual performance of mitzvot. You take a garment and you put tzitzit on. You make kosher food for a meal and not mixing milk and meat. And you celebrate Shabbat by enjoying a nice food. So you take physical, both of them are necessary. I don't think we need to dwell to delve into it. For this reason, there must be a masters of Torah among the Jewish people, for the study of the Torah illumines the observance of the mitzvot by the masters of good deeds, enabling the essential influence drawn down by these good deeds to be revealed. So you cannot just have people who go to work and work all day and try to do what's right. First, because they need to know how to conduct themselves. Second, all their deeds and behavior has to be inspired by the masters of Torah. Nevertheless, the essential influence is drawn down primarily by the master of good deeds, and the divine service of the master of Torah primarily serves to illuminate and reveal the achievements accomplished through the fulfillment of the mitzvot. Therefore, the pattern was established that there are few masters of Torah, while the majority of the Jews be involved in the worldly task. To borrow the Torah's words, you shall gather your grain. What the rabbi is saying is, there must be both. Both are necessary. But the real best way, deepest way to connect to God is through the good deeds. And therefore, masters of Torah are always in the minority. It's a smaller group among the Jewish people. Their job is to inspire those who go to work, those who deal with the day-to-day life, to be connected to God in all their behavior. So the end result is to serve God in the material world, to go to work, to build homes, to have families. But how do you do it correctly? How do you stay within the lines that God has drawn? For that you need masters of Torah to influence and inspire. Therefore, the masters of Torah are a small group. Does that make sense? Okay. Now we can understand this is one of the differences between the tribes of Gad and Reuben and the spies. The spies desire that the entire Jewish people remain outside of Eretz Israel. This is certainly the opposite of God's intent. The tribes of Gad and Reuben, by contrast, desire that only they remain in Transjordan and be occupied as shepherds, dedicating their lives primarily to Torah study. This is not the opposite of the divine intent. On the contrary, there is a necessity for a small portion of the Jewish people to follow this mode of divine service. What's the difference between the spies and they? The spies did not want anyone to enter the Holy Land. They all wanted to be masters of Torah, studying Torah and occupying themselves in spirituality, only receiving the manna from God and water from the well of Miriam. Gad and Reuben, on the other hand, wanted the rest of the tribes to enter the Holy Land, but always be inspired. There should be somebody who is the beacon of light that showed them the right way, and they are going to be the one. The small group, out of 12, 2 out of 12, is about 15%, less than 15%. And therefore, they felt that that's their task in serving God. This said, Moshe still rebuked the tribes of Gad and Reuben, telling them, this is what your ancestors did. For the mission of the masters of Torah is not to remain separate and strive to reach spiritual heights for themselves, but to illuminate and increase the vitality of divine service of the Jewish people as a whole, the masters of good deeds. Now we can understand Moshe's rebuke the first time he hears about it. He rebukes them because he said, if you want to be masters of Torah, you have to reside among the masters of good deeds, because you have to influence them. You have to inspire them. That's the purpose of your life. You cannot be living across the Jordan, far away, and there is no effect that you are bringing on the rest of the Jewish people. The giving of the Torah brought about a radical change in the spiritual state of all existence. The potential was granted for the lower realms to ascend to the higher realms, and the higher realms to descend to the lower realms. As has been mentioned on numerous occasions, one of the interpretations of the upper realms descending to the lower realms is that Torah scholars should extend themselves and be in contact with the Jews who work to earn their livelihood and inspire them. Therefore, the original request of these tribes do not have us cross the Jordan, that is, that they be entirely separated from Eretz Israel, was the opposite of God's intent. Moshe rebuked enabled them to reorient their understanding, and called forward the Mesirat Nefesh, but they're willing to give up their life in the conquest of the Holy Land, which was intended to lead to the divine service that characterized life in that land. That is, the integration of the spiritual and the material. After they accepted his word, saying, "We will proceed as the vanguard before the Jewish people," Moshe agreed that they could take their portion in Transjordan. In other words, Moshe rebukes them. He says, okay, so you're not like the spies because you're a small group and not the entire, but you're separating yourself. Just like the spies, you are not influencing the rest of Jewish people. And the goal is for you to influence them and affect them in a positive way. What do they say? We are willing to be the vanguard. We're going to go first. Going first meaning we will be there to defend them, so they will always be influenced by us, and there will be always, we will be connected with them. Nevertheless, says the Rebbe, we're going to finish it. Let's finish it. Nevertheless, despite the above explanation, by choosing to settle in Transjordan, it can be said that these tribes, in a subtle sense, deviated from the ultimate inner dimensions of God's intent. Therefore, their choice is described as, in the Talmud, an inheritance seized hastily at the outset. It recalls the intense yearning for godliness that characterized the realms of chaos, though the opposite of subtle approach that characterizes the realm of rectification, tikkun. For the essence and the inner dimension of God's intent is not only to draw down light, but to have it contained and enclosed within the world's material substance, thus making a dwelling place for him in the lower realms. Rather than separate ourselves from material experience and seek to be absorbed in spirituality, our divine service must involve fusing the two together, drawing godliness down into even the most material dimensions of existence. What the Rabbi is saying is, at the end of the day, Moshe accepted it, but yet the Talmud is criticizing them because this type of totally separating yourself from the universe, even though it's for the service of the rest of the Jewish people, is still inappropriate. They should have entered the Holy Land, and they could have served God as masters of Torah in the Holy Land instead of doing it outside. And that's why they were the first to be exiled from their place. And with that, we'll conclude today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.